morning. I'm Margaret Stanley, a virologist immunologist who works on the papillomavirus, and I'm from the University of Cambridge, where I work in the Department of Pathology. I'm talking about the human papillomavirus vaccine, which is a successful vaccine against a virus-induced cancer. Is there a burden of disease? Yes, we do need an HPV vaccine. There's a very substantial cancer burden attributable to infection with the human papillomavirus. There's a big burden in women from cervical cancer, but also other cancers, vulva, vagina, anus, and oropharynx, which is the tonsil and base of tongue. And men have about 3 times as much oropharyngeal cancer as women. They also have anal cancer, particularly in men who have sex with men, and penile cancer. 5% of all cancers are HPV attributable, and it's a common infection, usually but not always sexually transmitted. What are these viruses? Well, they're double-stranded, non-enveloped double DNA viruses. They are intensely restricted in their host range. So human viruses only infect humans, rabbit viruses only infect rabbits, and they will undergo productive infection, that is, infection and producing a new infectious virus in squamous epithelia. So they are very specifically epithelial trophic. They're part of a huge family, at least 150 known types, and they infect the squamous epithelia, skin, and the internal mucosae. And it's the ones which infect the internal mucosae that have received intense investigation, and they fall into 2 groups. There are low-risk types because they don't cause cancers, they cause warts, and the common members are HPV 6 and 11. And there are high-risk types, 13 high-risk types according to WHO, and they are true cancer-causing viruses, true human cancer viruses. The most important are HPV 16 and 18. HPV 16 is found in at least 60% of cervix cancers, wherever you are on the planet, followed by 18, which is present in about 7 to 20%, depending on your geography. Then these other types are responsible for 2 or 3% at most, and they are really big players. The point is that 16 and 18 together cause 70% of human cancers, 45, 31, 33, 35, 52, and 58 cause 90% of cancers. So that has been the important factor when you think about how the current vaccines are made. Now, the virus structure is very simple. It has a very simple coat. It has 2 proteins. A major capsid protein L1 and a minor capsid L2. The major capsid protein is present in these rosettes or pentamers, each of which consists of 5 L1 molecules studded across the particle. Neutralizing antibodies are directed against the L1 protein in the native or tertiary conformation. So that means whatever vaccine you develop, the protein has to be correctly folded and assembled. And that is achieved by expressing major coating protein in recombinant vectors to form virus-like particles. So the L1 gene is cloned out, put into a recombinant vector, yeast or baculovirus. These produce L1 proteins. They spontaneously assemble into pentamers, and the pentamers stochastically assemble, self-assemble, forming this virus-like particle, which is morphologically and antigenically virtually identical to the wild-type particle. Crucially, it has no DNA, so it's not infectious. VLPs are the antigen in the commercially available vaccines. There are 2 which have been on the market since 2007-2006. Cervix from GlaxoSmithKline targets 16 and 18 and is adjuvanted with the immunomodulator ASO4, an agonist of toll-like receptor 4. Gardasil from Merck Vaccines has 4 HPV types, H6 and 11 for genital warts, 16 and 18 for cervical cancer. It has a conventional adjuvant. In 2014, a new vaccine, Gardasil 9, which was identical to Gardasil in these 4 types, but had 5 additional cancer-causing types, was released to the market. The schedule it's an intramuscular injection, and the initial controlled trials, 9 to 26-year-old women, subunit protein vaccine classically is given as prime boost, and this was the situation for the 2 vaccines. Then in 2014, WHO recommendation for adolescents was that given a 2-dose schedule, 0-6 or 0 to 12 months, because the antibody responses weren't as good in 9 to 15-year-old girls immunized with 2, as in 9 to 15-year-olds immunized with 3 doses of these vaccines. 3 doses for older women remained. Additional types are on the market from India, China, and Vietnam. And these are, again, comparable to the current market leaders in terms of what vaccine types are in there. Question, do these vaccines work? They're delivered in predominantly in school-based programs in 2 doses to adolescents. The first question is, do they prevent infection? And this is data from England, which has a school-based program given to cohorts of girls in 12 to 13. You can see that since the introduction of the vaccines back in 2008, there has been a steady, almost complete reduction in virus prevalence in 16 to 18-year-old girls. These girls are highly sexually active because they're coming up for part of their chlamydia testing. So this is the surveillance group. It depends very much on vaccine coverage. You get maximum impact if your vaccine coverage is well above 80%, as it is in the UK. You can see that there's an impact also on these types because there's some level of cross protection, particularly from cervix. Does it prevent cancer? We can answer this question now because the adolescent cohorts immunized in 2008 are coming up to the entry into the screening programs. So in the Nordic countries, which I'm showing you here, the registry-based data, so these are women who have been vaccinated of these age groups, and these are the cases of cervix cancer that occur in these cohorts in 100,000 women. Unvaccinated, something like 94 cases. Pure vaccinated, 17 to 30. There's a reduction down to 54. But if you are vaccinated in adolescence, then there's this dramatic reduction. So coverage and age are crucial. This is shown also from England, where we're looking at the relationship between a very high coverage of vaccination and registry-based data for cervix cancer. So in the unvaccinated cohort, there is this very high increasing incidence as the age of cervix cancer. Please look at this is CIN3, this is a pre-cancer, this is invasive cancer. Please look at this is incidence by 100. This is incidence by 100,000. So if you vaccinated to 16 to 18, coverage is low, but there's still an impact. Vaccinated 14 to 16, coverage is 80%. There's a dramatic impact. Vaccinated at 12 to 13, coverage very high. Virtual elimination is red bar of cervix cancer and its obligate precursor. The prevention of infection and prevention of lesion. So this is important because it means in future trials, the surrogate endpoint can be infection rather than waiting for disease. Unfortunately, cervix cancer is at its most prevalent and important in low-income countries, such as in sub-Saharan Africa. The vaccines are expensive. It's difficult to implement. So the question has been, how many doses are needed for protection? Could we get away with one dose? And in 2022, WHO SAGE gave a permissive recommendation for one dose of vaccine. If you wish to keep up with the data on the current situation, please look at the HPV dashboard from WHO, which gives you this information. Here we are. Here's the website. It's important to know how these vaccines work. A key factor is that the vaccine induces much higher antibody levels than natural infection. Why? The structure of antigen and the context in which a B cell encounters antigen are the key factors in the antibody response. And in this sense, the HPV VLP is virtually ideal. It has a size which allows entry into endothelial dendritic cells. It's a 50 nanometer particle. Its geometry is crucial. It's a multivalent protein antigen, 360 copies of L1, assembled as pentamers in this dense repetitive array. This is very, very immunogenic service. And the context, in natural infection is not accompanied by inflammation. The vaccines have powerful adjuvants that elicit inflammation at the injection site, and they themselves are inflammatory. So these are successful vaccines because, to summarize, 5% of all cancers are attributable to HPV infection. 16 is the most important. The vaccines are recombinant subunit vaccines consisting only of the L1 protein assembled as a virus particle, and this is a highly immunogenic antigen. If you deliver these vaccines high coverage to the 12 to 13-year-old cohort, the vaccines reduce virus prevalence by 84% and cervix cancer in women under 30 who have been vaccinated by 92%. They're very immunogenic, and irrespective of whether you get them as 1, 2, or 3 doses, induce high levels of excellent antibody that persists for at least 17 years, and vaccine protection, we know, extends for at least 20 years. So, thank you for the vaccines. Thank you for listening. Remember, coverage, coverage, coverage. Vaccines don't prevent cancer. Vaccination does.